The flight attendant stopped in the first-class aisle. "Excuse me, young man, passengers aren't allowed up here." Jaden Williams looked up. His black suit was pressed sharp, the ticket trembling slightly in his hand. "I have seat 2A, ma'am." Her eyes drifted across his young black face, and the polite smile faltered. "Really? This isn't the section for lost children." Whispers rippled through the cabin. A man muttered, "Kids these days think a suit buys them anything." Jaden inhaled slowly, spine straight. "I'm not in the wrong seat. You can call the chief attendant if you'd like." Her lips tightened as she reached for the intercom. The cabin fell silent, every gaze fixed on the 12-year-old boy standing beneath the warm glow of first class. Just a few steps away, the badge on his seat gleamed. TechRise Summit, VIP speaker. Tomorrow, that boy will make the entire New York stage rise to their feet. But tonight, he faces a lesson no stage could ever teach: how to stand tall beneath doubt. If you were Jaden, would you stay silent or speak up? Comment your choice. His story is just beginning. Jaden kept his voice calm, respectful, the way his father had taught him. "I'm traveling alone to a technology conference in New York. I'm a speaker." Karen's eyebrows rose, but not with admiration, with disbelief. "A speaker? You're 12. "Yes, ma'am. I'm presenting on AI ethics in service industries." She studied him like he was a puzzle with missing pieces. "Right. And who exactly invited you to this conference?" Jaden pulled out his phone, opened his email. The official invitation from TechRise Summit was right there, complete with logo, schedule, and his headshot on the speaker lineup. He held it out to her. Karen glanced at the screen for exactly 2 seconds. "Anyone can fake an email, sweetie. I need to verify this." She turned to her colleague, a flight attendant near the galley, and spoke loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Janet, can you help me check something? This seems irregular." Irregular. The word hung in the air like an accusation. A middle-aged white woman in seat 3C leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. "The boy has a ticket, doesn't he? Why are we delaying?" Karen's smile tightened. "Ma'am, this is standard security protocol. We need to ensure all unaccompanied minors have proper documentation." She turned back to Jaden. "Do you have a guardian consent form? A letter from your school? Proof of registration for this conference?" Jaden reached into his messenger bag, the one with his initials embossed on the leather, a birthday gift from his father. He pulled out a folder containing everything: the conference registration confirmation, his speaker bio, even a printed schedule showing his presentation slot. He handed it to Karen with the same quiet dignity his father demonstrated in boardrooms. Karen flipped through the pages slowly, too slowly. She wasn't reading. She was stalling. "I still need to call and verify. You understand, right? We can't just take your word for it." "Of course," Jaden said softly, but his mind was working, cataloging. The way she'd accepted the boarding pass of the white teenager in 4B without question. The way she'd smiled warmly at the elderly couple in 1A. The way her entire demeanor had changed the moment she saw him. "Stand here while I make the call," Karen instructed, gesturing to the aisle. "Don't sit down yet. Don't touch anything." Jaden stood. 15 minutes before scheduled departure. Other passengers had settled into their seats, opening laptops, adjusting pillows, accepting pre-flight beverages. But Jaden stood in the aisle like a suspect in an interrogation room, his carry-on at his feet, his suit jacket perfectly pressed, his posture straight. A black man in his 40s, seated in 5A, caught Jaden's eye. The man's expression said everything. "I see you. I know what this is. I'm sorry you have to learn this lesson so young." Jaden gave him the smallest nod. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. He was observing. Every detail mattered now. Karen's name tag, the time on his phone, the faces of passengers who looked away, uncomfortable but silent, the ones who watched with arms crossed. already deciding he was the problem. Karen returned from the galley, another flight attendant trailing behind her. "Still trying to reach someone at the conference," she announced. "These things take time. You know how it is." Except Jaden did know. He knew exactly how it was. This wasn't about verification. This was about a 12-year-old black boy in first class, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, claiming to be important enough to speak at a tech summit. This was about someone deciding, before asking a single question, that his presence was suspicious. Jaden's hand moved to the strap of his messenger bag, the embossed JW pressing against his palm. He thought about texting his father, thought about calling Lisa, his father's legal director, who could have this resolved in 30 seconds. But something in him resisted. He was 12, yes, but he was also Jaden Williams, and he wanted to see exactly how far this would go. 20 minutes past departure time. The cabin door was still open. Passengers were getting restless. A man in a crisp Freedom Air uniform approached, name tag reading David Cooper, lead flight attendant. He had the bearing of someone used to authority, the kind of person who resolved problems quickly. Jaden felt a flicker of hope. "What's the situation here?" David asked Karen. "Unaccompanied minor. Claims he's going to a tech conference. I'm still verifying." David looked at Jaden, his expression neutral but assessing. "Son, we can't let you fly without proper verification. It's airline policy." "I understand, sir," Jaden replied, "but I've provided everything. Boarding pass, conference invitation, registration confirmation. What else do you need?" David picked up the folder Karen had set aside. He scanned the documents, and for a moment, Jaden thought reason would prevail. Then David closed the folder. "These could be printed by anyone. Do you have a contact number for your parents?" "My father is Michael Williams. I can call him right now." "That won't be necessary. If you can't provide verifiable documentation in the next 10 minutes, we'll need to remove you from the aircraft." David's tone was final. Not cruel, but inflexible. The tone of someone enforcing rules without examining why those rules were being applied so selectively. Jaden's throat tightened. "Sir, I've been through TSA. I checked in at the gate. My ticket is valid. Why am I being treated differently than other passengers?" David's jaw tensed. "We're not treating you differently. This is standard procedure for unaccompanied minors. I saw a teenager board 30 minutes ago. Seat 4B. White kid, looked about 16. Nobody asked him for guardian letters or school documentation." The cabin went quiet. Even the passengers who'd been determinedly ignoring the situation looked up now. Karen jumped in. "That's completely different. That passenger didn't raise any red flags." She caught herself, but too late. An older black woman in seat 7A stood up. She was elegant, gray hair in natural curls, wearing a blazer that suggested retired professional. "Excuse me, but I'm a witness to what's happening here. This young man has been respectful, patient, and has provided every document requested. What red flag are you referring to?" Karen's face flushed. "Ma'am, please sit down. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone on this plane. I'm Sarah Thompson, retired civil rights attorney, and I'm recording this interaction." She held up her phone, screen facing forward. David stepped toward her. "Ma'am, you can't record crew members without permission." "Actually, I can. This is a public space, and I'm documenting potential discrimination." Sarah's voice was steady, lawyerly. "And before you threaten to remove me too, know that I'm live streaming to my Facebook page, 5,000 followers and counting." Jaden's heart pounded, but he kept his face neutral. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted it to escalate. But Sarah's intervention was forcing everyone to see what he'd seen from the beginning. This wasn't about policy. It was about perception, about who belonged in first class and who didn't. Another passenger, a black man in a tailored business suit, rose from seat 5A. "I'm Marcus Reed, business consultant. I fly Freedom Air weekly, platinum status, and I've never seen this level of scrutiny for any passenger who wasn't black or brown." David's expression hardened. Sir, I'm going to ask you to sit down. You're disrupting the flight. The flight hasn't even taken off, and the only disruption I see is two crew members harassing a child. Other passengers began murmuring. Some pulled out their phones. The cabin was transforming into something Karen and David hadn't anticipated, a courtroom of public opinion. Jaden stood in the center of it all, still holding his folder, still not sitting, still not showing the fear that was building in his chest. He glanced at his phone. A text from his father, sent 5 minutes ago. "Everything okay, son? Your flight should have taken off by now." Jaden's thumb hovered over the keyboard. 3 words could end this. 3 words, "Dad, I need you," and Michael Williams would descend like thunder. Lawyers, media, corporate pressure. But Jaden didn't type them. Not yet. He wanted to see how far this system would go when it thought no one was watching, when it thought a 12-year-old black boy had no power. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked directly at David Cooper. "Sir," Jaden said quietly, "I'd like to speak with the airport manager, or your supervisor, because I believe what's happening here isn't about policy, and I think your company should know." David pulled out his radio. "Ground services, we need assistance in first class. Possible removal of a passenger." The words hit like a slap. Removal. As if Jaden were cargo, not a human being with valid documentation and a paid ticket. Karen seized the moment. "Before security gets here, I need to inspect your bag. Standard procedure for suspicious passengers." "Suspicious?" The word escaped Jaden's lips before he could stop it. "You're traveling alone. Expensive clothes, high-end electronics. We need to ensure everything is legitimate." Karen reached for his messenger bag. Jaden pulled it back instinctively, then forced himself to hand it over. Refusing would only make things worse. He watched as Karen unzipped it, her hands rifling through his belongings like a customs agent searching for contraband. She pulled out his laptop, a MacBook Pro, latest model. "This is yours?" "Yes, ma'am." "Who bought it for you?" "My father." Karen's lips tightened into a thin line. She pulled out his iPad, his noise-canceling headphones, a leather-bound notebook. Each item seemed to offend her more than the last. "These are very expensive things for a child to be carrying." "I use them for my work," Jaden said quietly. "Your work." Karen's tone made it sound like a joke. She held up the laptop. "What does a 12-year-old need a $3,000 computer for? Gaming?" Sarah's voice cut through from row 7. "That's enough. You're not customs. You're not TSA. You have no legal right to search his belongings." Karen ignored her, pulling out more items. Conference materials, USB drives, a small trophy from a coding competition. She examined each piece like evidence in a trial, holding them up for other passengers to see, making a spectacle. Then she found the notebook. Jaden's personal journal, where he sketched ideas, wrote code fragments, processed his thoughts. Karen opened it, started flipping through pages. "Please don't read that," Jaden said, his voice cracking slightly. "That's private." "If it's private, why bring it on a plane?" Karen kept reading, her eyes scanning his handwriting. His 12-year-old thoughts about algorithms, about his mother who'd passed away 3 years ago, about the pressure of being Michael Williams's son. Jaden felt his chest tighten. His hand moved unconsciously to the strap of his bag. The embossed JW pressing into his palm, his father's initials and his own, a reminder of legacy and expectation. For a moment, his eyes stung. He swallowed hard, forced himself to breathe. "Don't cry. Dad said you're strong." But inside, a younger voice whispered, "Why do they hate me?" A businessman in row 2 stood up. "This is outrageous. The kid has done nothing wrong. Let him sit down so we can take off." David turned to address the growing unrest. "Ladies and gentlemen, we understand your frustration, but passenger safety is our top priority." "Safety?" Marcus cut him off. "What safety threat does a 12-year-old with a laptop pose? Say it clearly. What about this child makes you think he's dangerous?" David's jaw clenched. "We're following protocol." Protocols that seem to only apply to black passengers, Sarah added, her phone still recording. I've been documenting everything. The differential treatment, the invasive search, the public humiliation. Karen finally closed the notebook, but not before Jaden saw her smirk at something she'd read. She stuffed everything back into his bag carelessly, not the way he'd organized it. Your story doesn't add up. Rich family, fancy conference, traveling alone. Kids like you don't usually... She caught herself again, but the damage was done. Don't usually what? Sarah demanded. Be successful? Be accomplished? Belong in first class? Karen's face flushed red. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Marcus pressed. I meant... Karen looked at David for support. I meant that something feels off. That's all. What feels off is the color of his skin, an older white man said from row 3. Several passengers gasped. The man shrugged. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. This is racial profiling, pure and simple. The cabin erupted. Some passengers agreed loudly. Others shifted uncomfortably. A few defended Karen and David, insisting they were just doing their jobs. The plane had become a pressure cooker, and Jaden stood at the center, his bag now back at his feet, his suit still perfectly pressed, but his dignity in tatters. Karen made one final play. Look, I'm trying to protect everyone here. Kids don't just show up in first class alone dressed like that, with thousands of dollars in electronics. Either his parents are negligent or he's... She stopped. Or he's what? Jaden asked, his voice quiet but steady. Say it. Karen's mouth opened, closed. She'd painted herself into a corner with her own implications. David stepped in. That's enough. Son, I'm sorry, but we can't allow you to fly today. You'll need to disembark and have a parent or guardian check you in properly. I was checked in properly, Jaden said. At the gate, by your staff. This is happening because you've decided I don't belong here. He pulled out his phone, no longer hesitating. His fingers moved across the screen, not calling his father, not yet, but texting Lisa, his father's legal director. Lisa, need full documentation. Audio, video, staff identification, incident report. Also check Freedom Air acquisition status. Where are we on the deal? The response came within seconds. Contract signed last week. 51% controlling stake. Public announcement in 10 days per SEC filing. What do you need? Jaden typed back. Wait for my signal. He looked up at David and Karen, at the passengers watching with expressions ranging from sympathy to irritation to indifference. He thought about the 147 discrimination complaints Freedom Air had received in the past year, the data his father's team had uncovered during due diligence. He thought about all the other black children who'd stood where he was standing, with no power, no resources, no voice. I'll get off the plane, Jaden said calmly. But I want both of your full names, employee ID numbers, and I want this incident formally documented, because this isn't over. Karen laughed. Actually laughed. Sweetie, you're 12. What are you going to do? Tell your daddy? Jaden met her eyes. Something like that. The calm in his voice made Karen's smile falter. For the first time, she looked uncertain. 5 minutes, David said. Gather your things. These protocols seemed designed to target one specific type of passenger. But did they know who they were really dealing with? 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door, both white, both armed with radios and the kind of authority that didn't need to be stated. They surveyed the cabin, eyes landing on Jaden. This the passenger? The taller officer asked David. Yes, unaccompanied minor, refuses to cooperate with airline policy. Jaden's hands trembled slightly, just enough that he had to clench them into fists to stop it. His voice came out higher than he intended, still carrying the edge of a boy who hadn't finished growing. I haven't refused anything. I've provided every document they asked for. I'm being removed because they decided I don't belong here. The second security officer, shorter and stockier, looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Jaden's boarding pass, still clutched in the boy's hand. "Kid's got a valid ticket. First class. What's the actual problem?" David stiffened. "We have the right to remove any passenger we deem—" "Let me see the documentation you provided," the first officer interrupted, addressing Jaden directly. Jaden handed over the folder. The officer read through it methodically. Conference invitation, speaker biography, registration confirmation. His eyebrows rose when he saw the presentation title, Algorithmic Bias in Customer Service, How AI Perpetuates Discrimination. "You wrote this?" he asked. "Yes, sir." The officer looked at his partner, some silent communication passing between them. "This looks legitimate. Official letterhead, verified registration number. I don't see grounds for removal." Karen jumped in, her voice rising. "He's 12 years old, traveling alone with thousands of dollars in electronics. That's not normal. Something's wrong here." "What's wrong?" Sarah called out, still recording. "Is that you're discriminating against a child. My live stream now has 12,000 viewers. People are watching this happen in real time." The cabin erupted into chaos. A white woman in row 4 stood up. "Can we just let the kid sit down and take off already? Some of us have connections to make." But a man behind her countered, "No, I want to know why the airline thinks this is okay. My son is 13. He flies alone all the time. Never been treated like this." "Maybe your son doesn't look suspicious," someone else muttered. Marcus whirled around. "Say that again, louder. Say exactly what you mean by suspicious." The passenger who'd spoken shrank back into his seat. David tried to regain control. "Everyone, please calm down. We're handling this." "You're not handling anything," Sarah interrupted. "You're harassing a child. And now it's gone viral. That freedom air discrimination is trending on Twitter. Look it up." She was right. Passengers were pulling out their phones, scrolling through social media. Screenshots of Sarah's live stream were being shared across platforms. Commentary was pouring in, most of it outraged. Some defending the airline, but they were being drowned out. Karen's face had gone pale. "That's not fair. You're twisting this into something it's not." "Then explain what it is," Marcus demanded. "Explain why this boy is being treated differently than every other passenger in this cabin." "We already explained." "You gave excuses, not explanations." The first security officer held up his hand. "All right, everyone step back. Let me talk to my supervisor." He pulled out his radio, stepping away toward the galley. In that moment of temporary reprieve, Jaden felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. His legs ached from standing for nearly 40 minutes. His chest felt tight. He wasn't crying, he wouldn't give them that. But the humiliation burned like acid. Every eye in the cabin was on him, some sympathetic, some hostile, some merely curious. He was a spectacle, a problem to be solved, not a person. The security officer returned, and behind him came a man in a suit, Richard Morrison, Airport Operations Manager for Freedom Air. He had the look of someone whose day had just gotten exponentially worse. Richard surveyed the scene, the passengers on their phones, the tension crackling through the cabin, the 12-year-old boy standing in the aisle with his shoulders back and his chin up, refusing to be broken. "What's going on here?" Richard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. David launched into his explanation. Policy, verification, standard procedure. Richard listened, his expression growing more troubled with each word. When David finished, Richard turned to Jaden. "Son, may I see your documents?" Jaden handed them over for what felt like the 100th time. Richard read carefully, and Jaden saw the exact moment recognition flickered across the man's face. "Williams," Richard said quietly. "Your last name is Williams." "Yes, sir." Richard's eyes moved from the conference invitation to Jaden's face and back again. The name was familiar to him. It had to be. Freedom Air had been in acquisition talks for months. The new majority shareholder was a tech company owned by... But Richard didn't make the connection. Not quite. Not yet. The name was common enough, and besides, what were the odds? "This all looks legitimate," Richard said slowly. "I don't understand why there's an issue." "Thank you," Jaden said, relief washing through him, but David wasn't backing down. "Sir, with respect, we've been trained to flag unusual situations. A minor traveling alone with this level of—" "What level?" Richard's voice had an edge now. "What specifically is unusual besides his age? Because we allow unaccompanied minors all the time. We have an entire protocol." "The protocol was followed at check-in," the second security officer added. "Gate agent cleared him. Everything's in the system." Karen looked panicked now. She'd gone too far and knew it. "I was just being cautious. You can't be too careful these days." "Careful about what?" Sarah's voice cut through. "Be specific. What threat does this child pose?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable without admitting the truth that everyone already knew. Richard made a decision. "David, Karen, you're both relieved of duty for this flight. Report to my office after landing." He turned to Jaden. "Son, I apologize for this. Please take your seat. We'll get you to New York." But Jaden didn't move. Something had shifted in him during the past 40 minutes. He'd been humiliated, searched, doubted, and dismissed. And now they wanted him to just sit down and pretend it hadn't happened? To accept an apology from a manager while the system that allowed this remained unchanged? "No," Jaden said quietly. Richard blinked. "Excuse me? I don't want to fly on this plane anymore. I want to speak with the CEO of Freedom Air, in person." Jaden's voice was steady now, no longer the uncertain tone of a boy being bullied. This was something else, something that made Richard Morrison take a step back. "The CEO is based in New York. I can arrange a phone call." "In person," Jaden repeated. "When I land in New York, and I want it documented that I'm requesting this meeting, with witnesses." He gestured to Sarah, to Marcus, to the security officers. "All of this needs to be on record." Karen let out a bitter laugh. "You think the CEO of an airline is going to meet with you because you're upset about a routine security check? Kid, you need to learn how the world works." Jaden looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, he let a tiny bit of the truth show in his eyes. Not enough to reveal everything, but enough to make her uncomfortable. "I know exactly how the world works, ma'am. The question is whether you do." Something in his tone made the cabin go quiet. Even the passengers who'd been arguing stopped. There was a gravity to the boy's words that didn't match his age, a confidence that suggested he knew something they didn't. Richard felt it too. A prickling awareness that he was missing something crucial. "All right," he said carefully. "I'll send word ahead that you're requesting a meeting, but I can't guarantee—" "She'll meet with me," Jaden said. Not arrogantly, just stating a fact. Richard nodded slowly, still trying to puzzle out what he was sensing. "David, Karen, off the plane. Now. I'll handle this personally." He looked at Jaden. "I'll escort you to your seat, and again I apologize for what happened here." "Apologies don't change systems," Jaden said. Then, more quietly, "But thank you for listening." As David and Karen gathered their things to leave, Karen leaned close to Jaden. Her voice was low, meant only for him. "You think you've won something here, but you're just a kid who caused a scene. This will blow over by tomorrow, and nobody will remember your name." Jaden met her eyes. He thought about his father's company, about the 51% controlling stake, about the Justice Initiative platform he'd been developing for the past 6 months, waiting for the right moment to launch it. "We'll see," he said simply. Karen walked off the plane, and Jaden finally, sat down in seat 2A. The leather felt the same as it had when he'd first boarded. The ambient lighting, the expensive smell, the prestige. But everything had changed. Sarah leaned forward from row 7. That was incredibly brave. Are you okay? Jaden nodded, not trusting his voice. He wasn't okay. His hands were still shaking. His throat was tight with unshed tears. He wanted his father. He wanted to be anywhere but here. But he'd stood his ground. And now he was going to finish what they'd started. Marcus caught his eye, gave him a small nod of respect. The older white man from row 3 said, "Good for you, son. Don't let them make you small." The businessman who'd defended him earlier patted his shoulder as he passed to use the restroom. "My nephew is about your age. I'd hope someone would stand up for him like this." And Jaden sat there, accepting their kindness, their solidarity, while his mind raced ahead. To New York. To the meeting with Catherine Hayes. To the moment when everyone would finally understand. The plane doors closed. The captain announced departure. And as Freedom Air Flight AT-102 finally began to taxi toward the runway, Jaden Williams pulled out his phone and typed a message to his father. "Dad, I'm okay, but we need to talk. Something happened that I think will change our plans for Freedom Air. I'll explain when I land. I love you." Michael Williams replied immediately, "I already know, son. Sarah's live stream reached me 10 minutes ago. 12 million views and counting. Lisa's on standby. Whatever you need, I'm here. Proud of you." Jaden closed his eyes, let himself feel it. The exhaustion, the residual fear, the anger that still simmered beneath his calm exterior. But also something else. Purpose. Clarity. The understanding that he'd just lived through something that couldn't be unseen or forgotten, and that he had the power to make sure it meant something. The plane lifted off, carrying him toward the reckoning that Karen Blake and David Cooper couldn't yet imagine. JFK Airport, VIP Lounge. 2 hours after landing. Jaden sat in a leather chair that swallowed him, making him look even younger than 12. His suit was slightly rumpled now, his tie loosened. Richard Morrison stood nearby, visibly nervous, checking his phone every 30 seconds. The door opened. Catherine Hayes entered, CEO of Freedom Air, 50-something, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of someone who'd built her career on crisis management. She'd been in a board meeting when the call came. Now she was here, facing a child who'd somehow commanded her presence. Behind her walked Michael Williams. The air in the room changed instantly. Michael was 6'3", wearing a Brioni suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. But it wasn't the clothes or the height that commanded attention. It was the quiet power that radiated from him, the kind that came from building empires and breaking barriers in an industry that hadn't wanted him. Richard Morrison's face went white. He recognized Michael Williams. Everyone in the business world did. And suddenly the pieces were falling into place. "Ms. Hayes," Michael said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that could cut glass. "Thank you for making time." Catherine's professional smile was already faltering. "Mr. Williams, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. I'm here for my son." Michael's hand rested on Jaden's shoulder. The gesture was gentle, protective, but it made a statement. "This child you humiliated? He's mine." Catherine's eyes moved from Michael to Jaden and back again, understanding dawning with the weight of an avalanche. "Your son, my son," Michael confirmed, "who was subjected to 40 minutes of racial profiling on your airline this morning, who was searched, humiliated, and threatened with removal despite having valid documentation, who handled himself with more grace and dignity than your employees showed in their entire careers." Richard Morrison looked like he might be sick. "Sir, I didn't know. When I saw his name, I didn't connect." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Jaden spoke up, his voice quiet but clear. "You didn't need to know who my father was. You just needed to treat me like a human being, like you'd treat any other passenger with a valid ticket." Catherine sat down heavily in the chair across from Jaden. For a moment, her CEO composure cracked, revealing genuine distress. "Jaden, I am profoundly sorry for what happened to you. What you experienced was unacceptable and Ms. Hayes, Jaden interrupted politely, do you know about the acquisition? Catherine blinked. Acquisition? Michael pulled out a tablet, handed it to her. Williams Holdings completed purchase of 51% controlling stake in Freedom Air last week. The contract was signed, filed with the SEC, pending public announcement in 9 days. Catherine's hands shook as she scrolled through the documents. Her company, her airline. The majority shareholder was sitting across from her, and his son, the child her employees had degraded, was the reason she was learning about it this way. The deal was kept confidential at the board level, Michael continued. Standard practice for acquisitions of this size. Richard here knew there was a new strategic investor. You knew there was a pending transition, but neither of you knew it was me. Jaden leaned forward. And that's why I wanted this meeting. Not because I'm Michael Williams' son, but because what happened to me happens to other people every single day. People who don't have powerful fathers. People who can't demand meetings with CEOs. He pulled out his own laptop, the one Karen had searched, and turned it to face Catherine. On the screen was a detailed spreadsheet. Williams Holdings conducted due diligence before the acquisition. We found 147 complaints of racial discrimination filed against Freedom Air in the past 12 months. Only 3 were investigated seriously. The rest were classified as customer service disputes and dismissed. That's a system, Ms. Hayes, not isolated incidents. Catherine stared at the data, her face ashen. I wasn't aware the numbers were this high. Because someone decided you didn't need to be, Jaden said. Someone decided these complaints weren't important enough to reach your desk. But they reached mine. Because my father taught me to look at data before making investments. And what I saw told me that Freedom Air has a culture problem, not just a few bad employees. Michael's voice was ice. We were prepared to be silent partners, to let you run the airline while we focused on long-term strategic growth. But after this morning, I'm questioning whether Freedom Air deserves that trust. Mr. Williams, please, Catherine started. No. The single word from Michael carried the weight of finality. You don't get to please your way out of this. My son stood in that aisle for 40 minutes, being treated like a criminal, while your employees violated every principle of basic human decency. And when he asked for accountability, your flight attendant laughed at him, told him nobody would remember his name. Jaden's jaw tightened at the memory. Michael saw it, and his expression hardened further. So here's what's going to happen, Michael continued. Williams Holdings will only continue as majority shareholder if Freedom Air commits to comprehensive reform, complete overhaul of your discrimination complaint process, mandatory bias training for all employees with third-party oversight, and a public apology, not to me, not to my son, but to every passenger who's experienced what Jaden experienced and had no recourse. Catherine nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you need. I'm not finished. Michael's tone didn't change. Karen Blake is terminated, effective immediately. David Cooper is demoted pending completion of extensive retraining, and Richard here. He glanced at Richard Morrison, who stood frozen by the door. Richard gets promoted to Director of Customer Experience because he was the only one who tried to do the right thing, even if he was too late. Richard's mouth fell open. Sir, You intervened when you could have stayed silent, Michael said. That's worth something, but it's not enough to fix the system. Jaden spoke again, his voice carrying a maturity that belied his age. Ms. Hayes, I don't want revenge. I want change. I've spent the past 6 months developing a platform called Justice Flight Initiative. It's an app that allows passengers to report discrimination in real time, with AI analysis to identify patterns and ensure accountability. No more complaints disappearing into databases nobody reads. He turned his laptop around, showing Catherine the prototype. Clean interface, simple reporting system, transparent tracking. Everything that Freedom Air's current system wasn't. We're launching it in 3 months, Jaden continued. And Freedom Air is going to be the first airline to implement it. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because if you don't, every other airline will, and yours will be the one known for protecting discriminators instead of passengers. Catherine looked at the screen, then at Jaden, then at Michael. You built this? You're 12. I'm 12, Jaden agreed. And I'm tired of being told that my age, or my skin color, or anything else about me determines whether I deserve basic respect. So yes, I built this. Because someone has to. The room fell silent. Catherine Hayes, CEO of a major airline, sat across from a 7th grader who'd just dictated terms for the future of her company, and she had no choice but to accept them. We'll implement it, Catherine said finally. All of it. The reforms, the platform, everything. You have my word. I need more than your word, Michael said. I need it in writing. Binding agreement with financial penalties for non-compliance. Lisa, our legal director, will have the documents ready by tomorrow morning. Catherine nodded, defeated but also, perhaps, relieved. Someone had finally forced her to confront a problem she'd been allowing to fester, and that someone was a child who'd refused to be silenced. Jaden stood, extending his hand to Catherine. Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Hayes. I hope Freedom Air becomes the airline it claims to be. Catherine shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. Thank you, Jaden, for not giving up, and for giving us a chance to do better. As they left the conference room, Michael put his arm around his son's shoulders. Proud of you doesn't even begin to cover it. Jaden leaned into his father's embrace, finally letting himself feel the exhaustion. Did I do okay? You changed an entire industry, son. I'd say you did more than okay. 48 hours later, Freedom Air's press conference made national news. Catherine Hayes stood at a podium flanked by Michael Williams and members of the Freedom Air Board. Freedom Air failed Jaden Williams, she began, her voice steady but edged with genuine remorse. What happened on Flight AT-102 was not isolated. It was systemic, and today we're announcing comprehensive changes. She paused, meeting the cameras directly. Karen Blake has been terminated, effective immediately. No severance, no references. Her actions violated our core values and federal anti-discrimination laws. David Cooper has been demoted to ground services and will undergo 6 months of mandatory bias training before any consideration for reinstatement. Across the country, Karen's apology video played on loop. Her face pale, voice trembling. I was wrong. I let prejudice cloud my judgment. I hurt a child who deserved respect. I'm sorry. But comment sections were merciless. Thousands shared their own stories of discrimination, of children profiled, of dignity stolen. Her apology felt hollow against that collective pain. Marcus Reed appeared on CNN. I've watched this happen for years. Black passengers questioned, scrutinized, treated like threats. Maybe now something actually changes. Sarah Thompson's live stream had reached 30 million views. Jaden demanded better. Because he had resources, he got it. But what about people who don't? That's why Justice Flight Initiative matters, Catherine continued at the podium. We're committing $50 million over 3 years to reform. We're implementing Justice Flight Initiative across all flights, real-time discrimination reporting with transparent accountability. We're partnering with civil rights organizations to overhaul training. And we're establishing an independent review board led by community advocates, not airline executives. Michael Williams stepped forward. My son chose to fight for everyone who comes after him. Justice Flight Initiative launches publicly in 60 days. Any service provider can implement it, because discrimination thrives in silence. Within a week, 3 major airlines requested the platform. Hotel chains followed. The service industry suddenly faced transparency it couldn't escape. Richard Morrison, promoted to Director of Customer Experience, appeared in training videos. I was there. I saw what happened. And I'll carry the shame of not acting sooner. We failed Jaden. We failed all of you. 2 months later, Karen Blake gave a tearful interview, unemployed. "Nobody will hire me. My name is toxic." The interviewer asked if she understood why. "I humiliated a child. I judged him by his skin color. I laughed when he said there would be consequences. I was wrong about everything." The internet had no sympathy. She should have thought about consequences before profiling a 12-year-old. But the real story wasn't Karen or David. It was the 147 passengers whose ignored complaints now received personal apologies and compensation. It was thousands downloading Justice Flight Initiative, ready to document discrimination anywhere. It was a system that had operated in darkness, suddenly exposed to light. And at the center was a 12-year-old boy who'd refused to be silent, who'd turned pain into purpose, and who'd proven that power comes not from age or position, but from the courage to demand justice. 3 months later, Jaden stood on the stage at TechRise Summit, the conference he'd been trying to reach that morning on Flight AT-102. 2,000 entrepreneurs filled the auditorium. The youngest speaker they'd ever invited was now the most anticipated. "When I boarded that plane," Jaden began, his voice steady through the microphone, "I was excited, nervous, proud, and then, in 40 minutes, I learned what millions already know, that no amount of preparation protects you when someone decides you don't belong." The audience was silent, attentive. "I could have cried, called my father immediately. Part of me wanted to, because I was 12 and scared and didn't understand why someone would hate me without knowing me." His voice caught slightly, but I knew that if I stayed silent, nothing would change. Not for me, not for anyone else. He clicked to the next slide. Justice Flight Initiative statistics. 47,000 downloads. 1,200 reported incidents. 890 resolved cases. The numbers told a story of systems beginning to shift. This platform isn't about revenge. It's about making invisible discrimination visible. Giving voice to people told their complaints don't matter. My father taught me that pain can be a teacher or a prison. You choose. His eyes found Michael in the front row. "I chose to let it teach me, to build something that helps others, so if they can't avoid what I went through, at least they won't face it alone." He paused. Freedom Air changed because silence became impossible. Accountability became unavoidable. That's the power of transparency. That's what happens when you refuse to accept this is just how things are. His voice strengthened. "I'm 12. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who got tired of being treated like I didn't belong and who had resources to do something. But here's what I learned. You don't need to be a CEO's son to demand justice. You just need courage, witnesses, and the absolute refusal to let injustice be normal." The audience erupted. Some stood, others wiped tears. Sarah Thompson and Marcus Reed, invited as his guests, clapped until their hands hurt. "Justice isn't a gift," Jaden concluded. "It's a right, something we build together, one brave decision at a time. If a 12-year-old can start that process, imagine what you can do." The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. And Jaden Williams, who'd once been told he didn't belong, stood on that stage knowing he'd helped create a world where belonging wasn't something anyone could take away. The video ended with Jaden's face filling the screen, his expression serious but hopeful. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and stayed silent? Have you been told you're overreacting, being too sensitive, making something out of nothing? Have your children come home asking why someone treated them differently and you didn't know how to protect them? His voice was direct, personal. Now you can do something. Text appeared on screen. Justice Flight Initiative. Download free. This isn't just an app. It's a movement. When you report discrimination through Justice Flight Initiative, you're not shouting into the void. You're creating data, building evidence, making patterns visible that companies can no longer ignore. Every report matters. Every voice counts. Images flashed across the screen. Diverse faces, real users, real stories. A black woman in a restaurant. A Hispanic man at a hotel desk. An Asian teenager at a retail store. People who'd been dismissed, overlooked, treated as less than. Now they had a platform. Download Justice Flight Initiative today. Document what happens. Share your story. Support businesses that commit to accountability. Boycott those that protect discrimination. You don't need to be powerful to create change. You just need to refuse silence. The screen shifted to show Freedom Air's transformation. New training programs, the Independent Review Board, Richard Morrison's commitment to reform. Change is possible, but only when we demand it. Only when we make the cost of discrimination higher than the cost of doing what's right. Jaden's face returned and he smiled. Not the practiced smile from the beginning of his journey, but something earned through pain and purpose. Share this story. Tag someone who needs to hear it. Let Jaden's experience remind you, justice doesn't come from hoping people will be better. It comes from making sure they have to be. The call to action was clear. Justice Flight Initiative. End discrimination. Your voice matters. And remember, Jaden's voice concluded, a hint of playful challenge in his tone, next time you see a kid in a nice suit on an airplane, don't assume they don't belong. They might just be on their way to change your world. The screen faded to black, then displayed one final message in bold white letters. Dignity is not something to prove. It's something to protect, yours, and those who cannot protect themselves. Below it, 3 simple words: download, document, demand. The video ended. But the movement Jaden Williams started? That was just beginning.